let's use the native browser's history to navigate to a contest. I'll be using the HTML5 History API here. This is decently supported on most modern browsers, but if you do need to support older browsers, you can use a library that does a fallback to older browsers' syntax when it doesn't detect the History API. I am also going to do a very simple routing without a library. I'm going to do this so that you get to understand the mechanics behind the routing and how it relates to server-side routing and server rendering in general. And the other reason, we only have one route in our application. We actually have two. We're going to go to a contest and we can go back to a list of contests. So it's going to be simple enough for us to just use the History API directly. If you have complicated routing, the React Router library is really good and it gives you a declarative way of defining your routes. But we're going to just use the History API. However, I'm going to put the History API in a function here. Let's call this function push state. And this function will receive the same parameters that the official push state receives. So I'll go with object and I'll go with the URL. And this push state is going to be an alias to window.history.pushState, the object, and an empty title, and the URL. This way, if I decided later on to support older browsers, all I need to modify is this function. So as a first step, when we click on a contest right now, we are recognizing the contest that we just clicked. Let's make the History API go to /contest/the ID of that contest. So we'll declare a function here. Let's call this function fetch contest. This function will eventually fetch the contest information from the server when we click on it. But for now, it only receives the contest ID. This is a function, and it will use push state to push a history record. First argument is the object about that record, and the second argument is the URL. So the URL is going to be /contest/the contest ID that we are receiving. And let's put on the state object, let's put the current contest ID, make that the contest ID that we're receiving. And now we want to use this fetch contest when we click on every contest, but we define this here on the main app component because it will eventually modify the state. So I'm going to pass it down to the children component. Let's call this on contest click, and this would be this dot fetch contest. And then inside contest list, we're going to receive a new property, this property called on contest click, and this is a React prop types dot function, and it's required. We'll have to also pass it to the contest preview. Let's call this on click. This would be the on contest click property that I get passed, so I need to destructure it here. Inside contest preview, we're going to also receive an on click property. This is a React.proptypes.function, also required. And inside handle click, I need to call this property. So this .props.onClick. And I want to send as an argument this .props.id. However, this is the first time I'm using the ID, so I have to define it here. PropTypes.number is required. And I think we're ready to test. Refresh. When I click on this one, the URL changed to contest/2. Let's try clicking on this one, contest/4. And I can actually go back in history and go forward in history, and the URL is working. However, I'm not changing the content yet, I'm just changing the URL. So in the next movie, we'll change the content when we click on a contest.